My name is Rachel Morgan. I am 32 years old, and I built my own small company from the ground up with nothing but grit, sleepless nights, and the belief that I could create something meaningful. For years, I poured my entire soul into my business, while my sister stood on the sidelines, never once lifting a finger to help me, and yet somehow she managed to steal the spotlight and claim the glory that never belonged to her. It all started when I was in my early 20s, fresh out of college, working long hours at a job that barely paid the rent. I remember eating instant noodles 5 nights a week, using my tiny bedroom as both an office and a warehouse. I had an idea: handcrafted wellness products, simple, natural, and affordable, that I believed people would connect with. I spent nights blending oils, designing labels with free software, and selling them at small markets. Slowly, painfully slowly, people began to notice. A few customers became loyal buyers. Then I had a small breakthrough when a local cafe agreed to stock my products. I was so proud I nearly cried that day. But while I was fighting for every small win, my sister, Melissa, lived a very different life. She was always the glamorous one, out with friends, traveling, shopping with money she didn't earn. My parents adored her and always thought I was too serious. I didn't mind at first. I just wanted to prove myself. What I didn't know back then was how her envy would one day poison everything I had built. When the business began to grow, I created an online store. Orders started coming in steadily, and I had to hire 2 part-time workers just to keep up with packaging and shipping. By the third year, I had expanded into skincare lines, candles, and herbal teas. Everything was branded with my signature: clean, simple, and personal. My customers weren't just buying products, they were buying trust. I had never taken a shortcut, never cut corners. I lived by my integrity. Then Melissa decided to take an interest. At first, I thought she was proud of me. She began showing up at my shop more often, always dressed like she was walking into a fashion magazine shoot. She would introduce herself to my employees with a bright smile and say things like, "Well, this is really our family business, you know." I remember staring at her the first time she said that, confused and unsettled, but I brushed it off. Maybe she was just joking, but then she started posting on social media pictures of herself in front of my shelves, writing captions like, "So proud of what I've built," or "Hard work pays off." My blood boiled, but I stayed quiet. I thought people would see through it, that it was just her trying to look important. I was wrong. Soon enough, her friends, and even some family members, began congratulating her. "Melissa, you're such an inspiration," they wrote. "Your business looks amazing." She didn't correct them. She never once said, "Actually, this is Rachel's company." Instead, she soaked in the praise like it was her oxygen. Things escalated the day a well-known local blogger came in for an interview. She had contacted me directly after hearing about my products and wanted to feature my story. I was thrilled, nervous, and ready to share everything about the long journey. But when she walked into the shop, Melissa happened to be there. Before I could even open my mouth, Melissa jumped in, shaking the woman's hand and saying, "Yes, welcome. I'm so happy you're here to talk about my work." I froze. I thought maybe she was joking again, just being dramatic. But she went on and on, talking about how she had the vision, how she started small but always knew she'd succeed. I could feel my chest tightening as I listened. My employee, Jessica, looked at me with wide eyes, waiting for me to interrupt. But for some reason, I didn't. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was disbelief that my own sister could do this in front of me. The blogger left with a glowing impression of Melissa, and by the next week, her article was published with a headline: "Melissa Morgan, the woman behind the natural wellness brand taking our town by storm." I wanted to scream. My name wasn't even mentioned. Years of work, sacrifice, and pain had been stolen from me with a smile and a lie. Customers began tagging Melissa in their posts, and she leaned into the role like she had been born for it. She even scheduled a podcast appearance, without telling me, where she spoke for 30 minutes about her brand's mission. I remember standing in my kitchen late at night, staring at my laptop screen with tears streaming down my face. I had spent nearly a decade building this business. My blood was in it, my heart, my soul, and yet the world thought Melissa was the mastermind. It was then I realized that silence was no longer an option. I had two choices: let her rewrite my story or expose the truth, no matter how ugly it got. That was the beginning of a storm I never could have imagined. I couldn't sleep for days after the article went live. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Melissa's voice, confidently stealing my story, my sacrifices, my identity. I paced my tiny apartment like a caged animal, going over the years in my head. The nights I stayed up until 4 in the morning labeling jars, the times I walked through the snow to deliver orders because I couldn't afford shipping, the tears I shed when my bank account showed less than $50 and I didn't know if I could pay rent. Where was she then? Where was Melissa when I was pawning off my old jewelry just to buy supplies? Nowhere. She was out buying designer bags with money from our parents. And yet here she was, draped in glory that didn't belong to her. First, I tried to be calm. I told myself I should talk to her. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. Maybe she didn't realize how serious this was. So one evening, I invited her over for dinner. I cooked her favorite pasta, set the table, and tried to keep my voice even. When she arrived, she breezed in like she owned the place, scrolling on her phone, laughing about something her friend had posted. "Melissa," I started, taking a deep breath. "I need to talk to you about the article." She looked up, pretending to be innocent. "What about it?" I clenched my fists under the table. "You told them the business was yours. You let them write that headline. Do you have any idea what that does to me?" Her eyes narrowed slightly, and then she laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh, come on, Rachel. Don't be so dramatic. It's just an article. Nobody cares about the details. People love a good story, and I give them one. You should be thanking me, honestly. I'm bringing attention to your little shop." "Your little shop." Those words hit me like a punch in the gut. My voice shook as I replied, "It's not a little shop. It's my life. And you're taking credit for something you had nothing to do with." She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "You're so uptight. Look, you're not exactly the best at putting yourself out there. You hide in your back room with your spreadsheets while I know how to talk to people, how to charm them. That's why people believe me. If you want this business to grow, you need someone like me. You should be grateful." Grateful. She wanted me to be grateful for her lies. For her theft. I felt the heat rise to my face, but I bit my tongue. I knew arguing wouldn't change her. She had always believed the world revolved around her. After that night, I decided I couldn't let her keep running wild. I started small. I began documenting everything: receipts, old photos of me at markets, screenshots of emails, invoices, every piece of proof I had that this business was mine. I told my employees to stop engaging with her if she showed up and to redirect all questions about ownership to me. I thought I was being clever, building a quiet defense, but Melissa was one step ahead in her own twisted way. She had charisma, and she wasn't afraid to use it. Within a month, she had convinced one of my biggest suppliers that she was the founder. I discovered it when I received an email about a pricing adjustment for Melissa's brand. My heart nearly stopped. She had actually contacted them under my company's name. When I called the supplier to correct the mistake, they hesitated, almost confused, and said, "Oh, I thought Melissa was in charge." That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about attention anymore. She wasn't just playing dress up with my life. She was actively trying to take control. And if I didn't fight back, I was going to lose everything I had bled for. The breaking point came during a family gathering. My parents had organized a small dinner, and as always, Melissa walked in looking like she had stepped off a magazine cover. Relatives swarmed her, congratulating her on her success. One of my uncles even raised a toast to Melissa, the brilliant businesswoman of the family. Everyone clapped. Everyone smiled. And I sat there with my hands shaking under the table, staring at the woman who had stolen my life's work, listening to my own family cheer for her. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up. My voice cracked, but it carried through the room. Enough. The chatter stopped. Dozens of eyes turned to me. Melissa tilted her head, smirking like she had been waiting for this. "This is my business," I said, louder now. with every ounce of pain and fury spilling out. I built it from nothing. I sacrificed everything for it. Melissa had nothing to do with it. She has been lying to all of you, to the world, to anyone who would listen. And I am done staying silent. Gasps filled the room. My mother's face went pale, my father cleared his throat nervously, and Melissa's smirk faltered for the first time. But before anyone could respond, she laughed again, that infuriating laugh, and said, "Rachel, don't embarrass yourself. Everyone knows you're jealous." Her words stung, but I saw something else that night too, doubt in people's eyes. A crack in her perfect mask. For the first time, I realized maybe, just maybe, the truth could win if I fought hard enough. That night, as I lay awake, I promised myself I would not let her steal my life. I would expose every lie, even if it meant turning the whole world against me, and so began my war against my own sister. After that family dinner, the air between Melissa and me became thick with open hostility. The mask had slipped, if only for a moment, and now the battle lines were drawn. She knew I was not going to stay silent anymore, and I knew she was willing to fight dirty to keep her false crown in place. The very next morning, I walked into my shop and found Melissa already there, leaning casually against a counter, chatting with one of my employees like she owned the place. I froze in the doorway. She turned, smiled, and said, "Oh, Rachel, I was just explaining the new direction we're taking with the brand." The brand. My brand. My fists clenched at my sides. I calmly asked her to step into the back room, away from my staff. She strutted in like she was walking a runway. "What are you doing here?" I asked sharply, trying to keep my voice steady. She shrugged, flipping her hair.
"I'm helping."
"You're overwhelmed, Rachel. Everyone can see it. You should be thanking me for stepping in." My voice rose before I could stop it. "You're not helping. You're sabotaging me. You didn't build this business. You don't know the first thing about running it. You need to stop." She smirked, her eyes gleaming with something almost cruel. "You really think people care about who started it? They don't. They care about the face, the story, the charm. And I have all of that. You're just boring." The words cut deeper than I wanted to admit, but I didn't let her see it. I ordered her to leave, and to my surprise, she did, though not without tossing a smug, "We'll see who wins in the end." Over her shoulder, from that day on, it became a tug-of-war. Melissa kept showing up at events, networking with people I had worked years to connect with. She attended markets where I sold my products, standing right beside me, telling anyone who would listen that she was the founder. And to my absolute horror, some of them believed her. Her charm was a weapon I had no defense against. One day, I received a call from a small boutique that had carried my line for over a year. The owner, who had always been kind and supportive, sounded hesitant. "Rachel," she said softly, "I've been approached by your sister. She says she's taking the business in a new direction, and, well, she offered us better margins if we stick with her." I nearly dropped the phone. My own sister was trying to steal my clients right out from under me. I begged the owner to give me a chance to explain, and, to her credit, she agreed. But I could tell there was doubt in her voice. Melissa's poison was spreading. That night, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by documents, emails, photos. All the proof I had. I realized that simply defending myself wasn't enough anymore. I had to go on the offensive. If Melissa wanted to play dirty, then I would drag every truth into the light. The opportunity came faster than I expected. A local business expo was scheduled in our city, a huge event with investors, media, and hundreds of potential partners. I had been preparing for months, with my own booth and presentation ready. When I arrived, heart pounding, I saw her. Melissa. She had her own booth, decorated with photos of my products, my branding, even my slogans printed on banners. She stood there smiling, surrounded by curious attendees. Something inside me snapped. I marched straight to the stage where I was scheduled to speak. The audience filled the chairs, investors sat in the front row, and the media cameras were rolling. My palms were slick with sweat, but my voice carried strong when I began. "Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rachel Morgan. And I want to tell you the real story behind this business. I didn't sugarcoat a thing. I told them about the nights I slept on the floor of my office, about the years I scraped by with nothing, about the struggle of building from absolutely zero. I showed photos of me at the very first market stall, exhausted but proud, holding the first labels I ever designed. I projected invoices and contracts with my name. I laid out the timeline, clear as day, and then I turned toward the back of the room where Melissa stood, arms crossed, glaring daggers at me. My voice shook, but I pressed on. I need you all to know something. My sister has been lying. She had no part in this business. None. She has taken my story and tried to pass it off as her own. But the truth is right here, in front of you. This company is mine. I built it, and I will not let my blood, sweat, and tears be stolen. The room was silent. For a moment I thought I had gone too far. Then the applause started, slow at first, then louder, until the room echoed with it. My chest ached with relief and fear all at once. I had exposed her, publicly, in front of everyone who mattered. Melissa stormed out before the presentation ended. That night, I went home exhausted but triumphant. For the first time in months, I felt like I had taken back control, but I had underestimated her. Melissa wasn't done. She wasn't going to let me win so easily. And what she did next nearly destroyed everything. For a short while after the expo, I thought maybe I had finally won. The applause from that audience still rang in my ears for days. Customers messaged me with encouragement. Old clients reaffirmed their trust, and even some family members called to apologize for believing Melissa's lies. I felt like I could finally breathe, but Melissa was not the type to accept defeat quietly. If anything, I had humiliated her, and humiliation was something she never forgave. IT started subtly. A nasty review popped up online, accusing my products of being cheap knockoffs and unsafe. At first, I ignored it, but then more appeared. Too many, too quickly. They all had different names, but the language was eerily similar. When I traced the accounts, I realized most of them were created within days of each other. I didn't have solid proof, but in my gut, I knew. It was Melissa. Next, shipments began going missing. Packages I had sent out to customers never arrived. When I contacted the courier service, they insisted everything had been logged correctly. But some of those missing addresses belonged to people I knew personally, and they swore nothing ever showed up. I couldn't prove it, but somehow Melissa had interfered. Then came the phone calls. Late at night, my business line would ring, and when I answered, there would be silence, or the faint sound of laughter before the line cut off. My employees noticed strangers loitering outside the shop, snapping photos. One afternoon, I even caught Melissa herself standing across the street, arms crossed, watching me with a look that chilled me to the bone. The final blow, though, came from within my own home. One Friday evening, after a long, exhausting week, I went out to run errands. When I came back, my front door was unlocked. My heart stopped. Inside, nothing looked stolen at first. My laptop was still on the table, my purse untouched. But when I checked the office corner where I kept all my business records, I found chaos. Files scattered, drawers pulled open, and the box of old contracts, receipts, and photos, the evidence I'd used to prove my ownership, was gone. I sank to my knees on the floor, shaking so hard I could barely breathe. It wasn't just the theft of paper. It was the theft of my truth. If Melissa had those documents, she could twist them, destroy them, or worse, use them against me. I called the police, but they were dismissive. No signs of forced entry. No fingerprints. Without proof, there was nothing they could do. But in my heart, I knew it was her. Days later, my worst fears materialized. Melissa posted a polished video online. In it, she sat in a spotless studio-like room, speaking directly into the camera with crocodile tears in her eyes. "I never wanted to say this," she began, her voice trembling with fake vulnerability, "but I can't stay silent anymore. My sister, Rachel, has been trying to erase me from my own business. She's spreading lies, painting me as a fraud, when in reality, I was the one who started this journey. I have the records to prove it. Then, one by one, she held up my documents. Invoices, contracts, old photos, twisted out of context. She claimed my suppliers knew her first, that I had merely helped on the side, that I was jealous of her success. She played the victim so convincingly that even I, watching, felt sick with doubt for a split second. The video went viral in our community. Some people believed her. Comments flooded in, half defending me, half attacking me. Rachel sounds bitter. Melissa is so brave for speaking out. Sisters shouldn't fight like this. The more I read, the more my chest ached, like I was drowning in betrayal. I felt like the ground had been ripped from under me. I had fought so hard to reclaim my name, and now she had twisted the narrative again. But in that pit of despair, something inside me hardened. I realized I couldn't fight her in whispers anymore. I had to fight fire with fire. If she wanted to go public, then I would go bigger, louder, and with undeniable proof. I began reaching out to old mentors, loyal customers, and even journalists who had followed my journey. I dug deeper into my archives, retrieving digital backups she hadn't stolen. I collected testimonials from people who had watched me start from nothing. I even found an old video of myself from years ago, recording in my kitchen late at night, talking about my dream of building this business. If Melissa wanted war, then war was what she was going to get, and this time, I was ready to burn every bridge to protect what was mine. The weeks that followed felt like walking through fire. Melissa's video had shaken everything I had worked for, and the sting of betrayal left me raw. But anger is a powerful fuel, and I used every ounce of it to fight back. I started small, posting my own video response. No studio, no fake tears, no polished performance. Just me, sitting at my work desk, exhausted but determined, surrounded by the very shelves where my business had been born. My name is Rachel Morgan. I began, my voice steady despite the storm in my chest. And I want to tell you the truth about this business. Not the version you've been fed, not the lies dressed up as drama. The real story. I showed everything. Old photos of me at farmers markets, holding tiny handmade signs that I had scribbled with markers. I displayed dated invoices with my name. I shared clips of emails where I begged suppliers to give me a chance when I was unknown. I even pulled out the journal I had kept, its pages full of late-night plans, sketches of product ideas, and tear-stained entries about how I was terrified of failing. This, I said, holding the worn book up to the camera, is the truth. This is my life. Melissa was never here for these nights. She never mixed oils until her hands blistered, never cried over a bank balance with $23 left, never begged strangers to buy a single candle just so I could pay rent. She showed up only when the hard work was already done. And now she wants to erase me from my own story. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply told my truth with raw honesty. And then I ended with this. You don't have to take my word for it. Ask the people who have been there from the beginning. Ask the customers, the suppliers, the friends who watched me build this from nothing. I have nothing to hide. The response was immediate. Messages poured in from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Old college friends who remembered me starting with tiny batches in my dorm kitchen, customers who had bought from my very first Etsy store, mentors who had guided me through my first business loan application. They flooded my page with comments, defending me, sharing their stories, saying, "Yes, this is Rachel's work. We saw it. We know it." Melissa tried to keep up her act. She posted more videos, painting me as bitter and jealous. But the cracks were showing. People started asking her pointed questions she couldn't answer. Where are the photos of you working? Why does every invoice have Rachel's name? If you started this, why are there no records before Rachel's launch? Her polished mask began to crumble, but just as I thought I was regaining my ground, she struck again, this time harder. Melissa hired a lawyer. I found out when I received an official notice. She was filing a lawsuit, claiming joint ownership of my business. My stomach dropped as I read the papers. She wanted half of everything. Half of the profits, half of the assets, half of my blood, sweat, and tears that I sat on my couch that night, staring blankly at the wall, feeling like I was drowning all over again. Fighting online was one thing. But court? Lawyers? Legal fees I could barely afford? That was a battlefield I wasn't ready for. Employees noticed my despair. One of them, Jessica, came to me after closing time. "Rachel," she said softly, "you can't give up. We've all seen what you've done. We believe in you. And if she thinks she can scare you into surrendering, she doesn't know who she's dealing with." Her words lit something inside me. She was right. I couldn't let fear paralyze me. Melissa had money, charm, and manipulation on her side. But I had truth. And I had people who had witnessed it with their own eyes, and I gathered every scrap of evidence. I dug through years of emails, found contracts, supplier correspondence, tax records, all with my signature. I reached out to loyal customers willing to testify. I even contacted the blogger who had once mistakenly written Melissa's name in that article. To my relief, she admitted Melissa had misled her and agreed to set the record straight. The lawsuit terrified me, but it also gave me a platform. This wasn't just about defending myself anymore. This was about standing up for every person who had ever built something from scratch, only to watch someone else try to steal it. The day I walked into the courtroom, I held my head high, even though my knees were shaking. Melissa sat across from me, dressed to perfection, her lawyer whispering in her ear. She glanced at me with that same smug smile, but for the first time, I didn't feel small under it, because this time, I was ready to fight with everything I had left. The courtroom smelled faintly of polished wood and old paper, but to me it felt like the stage of my life. Everything I had sacrificed, everything I had fought for, came down to this. Melissa sat just a few feet away, flawless in her designer suit, her hair styled as if she were heading to a photo shoot instead of a trial. Her lawyer leaned in, whispering confidently, while she kept that smug expression plastered on her face, the same one she had worn since the day she first stole my story. I sat at my own table, my lawyer beside me. I didn't have the money for someone flashy, but I had chosen a woman named Karen, a no-nonsense attorney with a reputation for fighting for small business owners like me. She wasn't glamorous, but she was sharp. And in that moment, that was exactly what I needed. The judge entered, and everyone rose. My chest tightened as the proceedings began. Melissa's lawyer opened with a speech that sounded rehearsed down to the last syllable. He painted Melissa as the visionary, the true founder of the company, while I was merely a supportive sibling who had taken on operational tasks. His words felt like knives, each one twisting deeper. He even gestured toward the stack of documents Melissa had presented as evidence, the very papers stolen from my home. When it was my turn, my palms were slick with sweat, but I forced myself to stand. My voice trembled at first, but I steadied it with the weight of truth. I told the judge about the nights I spent labeling jars by hand, about sleeping in my office, about selling my products at tiny markets before anyone knew my name. I explained how Melissa had shown up only after the business gained traction, and how she had carefully inserted herself into the narrative. Then Karen began to lay out the evidence. She was calm, deliberate, and relentless. She showed tax records, all under my name. She displayed contracts signed solely by me. She revealed the original business license application I had filed years earlier, dated long before Melissa ever set foot near my work. Piece by piece, the wall of lies Melissa had built began to crack, but the most powerful moment came when witnesses took the stand. First was Jessica, my employee, who spoke firmly about how she had worked for me for years and had never once seen Melissa contribute to the business. Then came an old college friend, who recounted how I had started experimenting with products in our dorm kitchen, long before Melissa was even aware of it. Finally, the blogger who had once mistakenly credited Melissa testified. Her voice shook with guilt as she admitted that Melissa had misled her during their interview, and that I had been the one she had originally contacted. Melissa's composure began to falter. I could see the twitch in her jaw, the way her eyes darted nervously whenever another piece of truth surfaced. Still, she tried to maintain her performance. When she was called to testify, she turned on the tears again, painting herself as a victim of my jealousy. She said I was trying to erase her role in our dream, but then Karen asked her one simple question. "Melissa, can you provide a single piece of documented evidence, anything at all, that shows you contributed financially, legally, or operationally to the business before it became profitable? The room went silent. Melissa's lips parted, but no words came. She shifted in her chair, glancing at her lawyer, but he said nothing. The silence stretched painfully long before she finally muttered, "I don't have it with me." It was the crack that broke the dam. The judge's face remained neutral, but I could sense the tide turning. And when closing arguments ended, I felt, for the first time in months, that maybe justice was within reach. Walking out of that courtroom that day, I didn't feel triumphant yet. My stomach still churned, my hands still shook, and I knew the final decision had yet to come. But there was one thing I did feel: power. For the first time since this nightmare began, I had faced my sister head-on, in front of the law, and I hadn't crumbled. Melissa glared at me as we passed each other in the hallway. "This isn't over," she hissed under her breath. I stopped, turned, and met her eyes. "You're right," I said quietly. "It's over when the truth wins. And the truth is on my side." She turned away, her heels clicking furiously on the marble floor, but I noticed something I had never seen in her before: fear, and that fear gave me hope that the end was finally near. The day of the verdict felt heavier than any other. I woke up before dawn, unable to eat, my stomach in knots. My lawyer Karen met me outside the courthouse, her face calm and unreadable, though she gave me a reassuring nod. Inside, the air buzzed with tension. Melissa was already there, flawless as always, sitting rigidly with her lawyer. She didn't even look at me as I walked past, but I could see her fingers tapping nervously on the table. When the judge entered, silence swept the room. I gripped the edge of the bench, so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Everything slowed as the judge began speaking, his voice steady, deliberate. He recounted the evidence, the testimonies, the timeline of events. With each sentence, my heart pounded louder in my ears, and then, the words I will never forget. Based on the evidence presented, the court finds that Rachel Morgan is the sole legal owner and founder of the business in question. Melissa Morgan is to cease any claims of ownership effective immediately. It felt like the weight of the world lifted off my chest. My eyes filled with tears as I tried to process what I had just heard. After years of sacrifice, months of lies, and weeks of battle, the truth had finally prevailed. Melissa's face was a storm. Her jaw clenched, her cheeks flushed, and for the first time, she had no performance left in her. She stood abruptly, heels echoing in the courtroom, and stormed out without a word. Her lawyer followed quickly, papers clutched to his chest. I sat there frozen, shaking, until Karen leaned over and whispered, "You won." Only then did I allow myself to breathe. The days that followed were surreal. The news spread quickly. Customers reached out with congratulations, loyal supporters celebrated alongside me, and even some of the family who had once cheered for Melissa admitted they had been wrong. My business didn't just survive, it grew. People respected that I had stood up for myself and for truth, even when it nearly broke me. But beneath the relief, there was still grief. Grief for the sister I had lost long before the courtroom. Grief for the bond that should have been stronger than envy. I had dreamed of success, but never like this. Never at the cost of blood ties. Melissa never spoke to me again, and though it hurt, I knew it was for the best. Some people would rather cling to their lies than face the truth. Standing in my shop weeks later, surrounded by shelves of products and the hum of loyal employees at work, I felt something I hadn't in years: peace. I had survived the storm. I had protected what was mine, and I knew one thing for certain: no one could ever take my story away again. Thank you so much for listening to my story until the very end. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: never let anyone rewrite your truth. You are the only one who knows the weight of your sacrifices, and you have every right to protect them. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next one. Your support means the world, and it helps me continue sharing stories like this. Until next time, stay strong, stay true, and never let anyone steal your voice.